Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our fourth Advanced Program webinar of the year. My name is Katie Briggs, and I'm your webinar host. This webinar is part 4 of a 7-part series taking place this year. Our series highlights topics you've shared with us and is directly tied to our 5th anniversary's mission to continue empowering public media. We're grateful to our series lead sponsor, CARS. Be sure to go to our website, publicmediawomeninleadership.org, after today's webinar to view this year's webinar schedule. During today's session, we'll allow for audience questions. Please be sure to use the Q&A function within the webinar platform to ask a question to our panelists. We'll do our best to get to everybody's questions. And please note that using the chat function will broadcast your question with your name to all attendees. So please be sure that you use the Q&A function, especially if you're sharing something that you would like to keep confidential. So now for the main event. Today, our panel will shine a light into the C-level interview process, and our panelists will share their tips and tactics on how best to prepare. And so I'm thrilled to present today's moderator, Lyndon O'Brien. Linda has more than 30 years experience in executive leadership at major public stations, overseeing enterprises at the national and local level. Most recently, she was president and CEO of South Carolina ETV and Public Radio, a statewide network of TV and radio stations. After 7 years heading the network, she retired in 2017, but has continued leading a multi-platform initiative. She's also a part of NETA Consulting, which provides executive recruiting and consulting services for public media licensees and related organizations. Linda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Katie. And hi, everyone. It is great to be here. And thanks to Deanna and Veronica for organizing such a timely topic. You know, even as we face issues of this pandemic and a slowing economy, it is really important to be ready should an opportunity present itself. And we'll hear today about some of the market dynamics, but I'm excited about today's topic on C-level interviewing, your bridge for the next opportunity. And you know, when you think about it, it is truly a bridge, and it is probably the key bridge to your next position. And why do I say that? Well, interviewing is probably the most important facet of the hiring process. Even with virtual gatherings as we have today, there are ways you can prepare yourself to put your best foot forward and make the case as a candidate. And if we can change the slide here. Today, we will be talking with 2 experts in the field of executive search, management, and overall leadership. And we look forward to hearing from Kim Henderson of Egon Zehnder and Tom Livingston of Livingston Associates. So in preparing for this C-level interview, I suggest you think about a job interview that you've had in the past and then magnify it. You may be interviewed for a C-suite interview by an executive, a committee, a human relations executive. It could be a number of people who will report to you. So there may be several variations of this interview, and each one of these interviews may be different. So it's important to really expect the unexpected. So let's go ahead and define C-level. And if you see them on the screen, of course, there is the CEO. We're all familiar with that. Chief Executive Officer, responsible for vision of the organization, overall strategic direction of the company. In public media, he or she generally reports to a board of directors, or it could be a commission, or if at a university, it could be an individual, a provost or a dean. The CEO is the highest level of the C-suite and responsible for hiring and firing of all other executives. And typically the CEO, along with a senior team, creates and fosters the strategic plan. Then you have Chief Operating Officer, COO, overseeing daily operations of the station. And this may include HR and finance in some organizations. And each organization is really different. So you kind of have to look and see how they are structured. Some of the other C-suite positions include CTO, Chief Technology Officer, CIO, Chief Information Officer, and Chief Marketing Officer. On my road to the CEO, although I didn't know it at the time, back in 2007, I was hired as a CCO, and that is Chief Content Officer at KQED in San Francisco. And at the time I was working with Nightly Business Report, the program I managed, and my colleagues did a really nice send-off reel. And one of the people on that reel was the late Jim Lair of the PBS NewsHour. And when it came to him, he looked into the camera and he said, "Good luck, Linda, but what in the heck is a CCO, a Chief Content Officer?" Well, it was rather new at the time. And a couple of years later, I'm not sure I fully knew the full ramifications of this position, but I did pick it up as I went. And really, it's very simple. It's content and various platforms. In the case of KQED, it's radio, it's television, it's online education. And then while I was there, we also added in engineering, IT, and operations from San Francisco south to San Jose and Monterey. So it was very broadly defined. If we can change the slide now. So where do you begin in preparing for a C-suite interview? Well, we are going to ask our panelists, but my first recommendation is to really think about the organization. And the first question for you is it a fit for you? The location, the community, the corporate culture, are the values consistent with your values? I would do that before even looking at your resume and getting it ready. With so much material on the web, you have a wide open canopy to start your preparation. There are often financial disclosures, articles, examples of content, even minutes of board meetings in some cases. This will give you valuable insight, important discovery for you, as we say, eyes open. And then 3 basics, and we'll drill down more, but make sure your resume is in order and try to customize it for the position. Highlight those items that would clearly resonate at the prospective company and this particular position. A cover letter is valuable to be able to explain why you want this position and your vision. And so you get all of that together. And then the second part is to get ready for the interview. And I like to anticipate the questions, not to take away the spontaneity, but so you feel prepared and go over your answers. You'll feel more confident that way, and you will feel you're ready for a whole range of questions. And finally, expect the unexpected. During a search I was involved with, there was one question the committee asked the finalists, and it produced the most interesting and maybe insightful answers. And a version of that question is, what brings you happiness? Change slide. So some of the candidates brought in their work experiences, some brought in hobbies, a number talked about family relationships. So think about how you would answer that or something similar. If I were answering that right now, these would be the images that would conjure up in my mind. And if we can change the slide. My little garden, which has taken on new meaning after being hunkered down over these past few months, like a lot of you are. It's been the one place where we can see our grandchildren, watch them play, and feel okay about social distancing. And beyond that, this little garden means renewal. It means transformation. It means adapting. Change slide. An associate sent me a seed pack from the folks at WGBH in support of the program World on Fire with Masterpiece. And I love thinking about victory gardens and what they represent. And as you can see, my little seed pack is growing very fast. It's much bigger since I took that picture. But it's a reminder of the seeds we sow when we embark on a new career and a new beginning. And it all starts with that first interview. Change slide. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Kim Henderson, and she is founding member of Egon Zender's Washington, D.C. office. She leads the hospitality, travel, and entertainment practice in North America, and she's a leader in the firm's nonprofit practice with a specialty in public media. She has expertise in executive search, management appraisal, and board advisory services. Prior to joining Egon Zender, she held senior positions at the Corporate Executive Board and American Express in London. Tom Livingston is founder and CEO of Livingston Associates. He is the public media leader and consultant with nearly 4 decades of leadership at the local and national level. He served 2 terms as vice chair of the NPR Board of Directors and has managed 3 different public radio organizations, including WETA in Washington, D.C. He is also a certified Myers-Briggs trainer and a certified coach. So Kim, let's begin with you.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for having me on this afternoon. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you. In preparation for our what's hopefully a really fruitful and rich session of Q&A, I thought I'd start with a couple of initial thoughts on the market today and how you might think about interviewing in a virtual world. Next slide, please. So one of the first questions I tend to get at the moment, both from candidates and from clients, is, what's it like out there today? And a couple of observations that I'll share with you, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how to prepare for a virtual interview. It is a little bit different. What I'll say first is the market is still fairly active, although between March and early May, it was quite quiet. So at the C-level, organizations who need to hire are still hiring. If you have a CEO transition or a CFO transition, other key positions that have already been planned, boards and senior executive teams need to do that hiring. So although they are adjusting themselves, hiring processes may slow down while everyone regroups and figures out how to navigate a very different interview process in a virtual world. The market is still active, although I'm sure Tom would concur, not as busy as it was pre-COVID. We hope that will change as people get used to a new situation. So a couple of the observations here, I won't read off the page to you, but certainly one of the trends I'm starting to see in the market is clients who are observing how executives are behaving under distress are realizing that actually there is a time to make a change. And so for organizations that have been very happy with leadership as it was under normal circumstances, they're realizing that there may be need for transition as we enter more distressed times. Next slide, please. So one of the things I think if you're planning on interviewing in the next 6 months plus, I'm sure you will anticipate doing an interview over Zoom, as we are all getting accustomed to today. It's a little bit different for those of you that haven't had to do this yet. The connection, making a connection with the other person at the other end of the screen takes a little bit more work, planning, and thoughtfulness. We're all used to interacting face-to-face, and all of the visual cues you get from sitting down with someone across the table go away when you're on a video platform. And so really thinking a little bit differently about how you present yourself over Zoom, how you build rapport, how you answer questions, does take a little bit more preparation and thoughtfulness on both the candidate side, and if you're in the position of interviewing people, on the interviewer side as well. Next slide. So there's a lot on this slide. So let me just orient you to a couple of the things that are the same and some of the things that are different. So when you're interviewing face-to-face, I think all of you have interviewed at some point for the jobs that you're in before, the jobs that you want to have. Many of those principles still apply here. So when you're on a video interview, you still need to make sure you know what time it is, you have the location, you've done your research and preparation, you've thought through the person that you're meeting, their background, a little bit about them, with the hope of making a personal connection, and you've really well researched the organization and the role, and you're prepared for some thoughtful questions. You still need to arrive on time, even though it's over video. Over video, what can be really important, and I think in our environments at home today, is trying to make sure as much as possible you aren't interrupted. I think everyone understands that children and pets wander into the backgrounds these days. Mine will not wander in today, but you just never know when someone makes a surprise appearance. I think there is certainly an understanding that those things happen, but as much as possible, the same as face-to-face, turn off your devices, make sure you arrange for no introductions, and try, if you can, to make sure that things don't pop up on your screen to distract you while you're trying to focus and pay attention. What I'm seeing more often is playing with different background settings. Make sure when you go on your Zoom interview that you've just double checked that your background isn't the joke background that you had for a friend or for a colleague beforehand. Those can catch you off guard. And also making sure that you have a backup plan. So you have the mobile number of the person you're interviewing, and if the tech doesn't work for whatever reason, you're not in a panic and you have a way to contact your interviewer. Sometimes what I've seen also more often is interviewers like to double up on Zoom. It's easy to do, and it can be a really different dynamic as the candidate if you're trying to manage multiple interviewers over a video platform. So making sure that you know who's going to be on the video as much as you can, preparing, and then just trying as best you can to navigate those different social dynamics. It can be a little more difficult in a virtual setting. And then finally, as the interview is coming to a close, just keeping an eye on the time, making sure that you think a little bit about how you're going to close the interview, what questions you're going to ask. This is no different than if you were at a face-to-face situation, but being thoughtful to presenting yourself as someone who's researched the opportunity, you've given some thoughtful questions to your interviewer, and if you feel comfortable, having a question about the next stage of the process so you know what to expect. I would say, and I'm sure Tom would concur, it's always good hygiene to send a thank you note to your interviewer. It never hurts. And I think especially in media, people really pay attention to words. So being thoughtful about the thank you note that you send and making it a little bit personal. I have seen in my experience, those get shared around with boards. And boards do really pay attention to how a candidate comes across on video and then after the session as well. Next slide, please. One of the things that video interviews really amplify is the content of your answers. And where I see candidates sometimes fall down is in either taking a really roundabout answer to a question, forgetting to answer the question itself directly, or just going on too long. And so some of the tips that I would offer, and they're on the screen here, be specific. And this is not specific to video interviews. This pertains to face-to-face as well. It's even more important in a video interview. Be specific in your answer. So generalities when you're asked about your leadership style, saying things like, I enjoy leading teams, or I'm a connector of people, that's really general. Tell a story about something you've done, have some impact. I think storytelling makes you a more memorable candidate, and it also helps the interviewer remember something about you. Sometimes in public media, especially if it's a board of directors who are interviewing, they're not commonly interviewing candidates often. And so they often maybe aren't very well practiced at interviewing. They may interview many candidates in a short succession of time. So finding a way to connect with the individuals you're interviewing with and be specific in your answers is important. The more specific you can be about your personal impact, what you did, what your role is, the more helpful it will be to your interviewer to better understand the impact you can deliver in that role. And again, at the end of your interview or the end of your answers, being clear about the result and the impact that you had. So the more you're able to say, if you were in charge of an initiative, what the outcome was, if it attaches to a number or some measure of your success, that's really helpful to share. It gives your audience a sense of, if you were to join their organization, what you might bring to the role. I can certainly say more, and I know Tom has some great insights to share too, but I thought for my opening comments, I'd just spend a little bit of time on how you might be interviewing in a COVID world. Thank you, Linda. You're on mute still, Linda.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much, Kim. That's great advice, and we'll get back to some of those points in the question and answer section. So now we turn to Tom Livingston, and if you would give us your overview for interviewing for a C-suite.
Great, thanks, Linda. And both what Linda said and Kim said are really important, and they covered a lot of the territory. I'll try to keep pretty brief so that we can come back and answer your questions. I want to underscore a few things. We go to the next slide. Say a little bit about us. We've been a full-time practice for 23 years now. My background is I managed public radio stations. Linda said a lot about it for 20 some years. We've done about 350 searches in public media, public radio and television, mostly local stations. We've done about 100 general manager and CEO searches. When we were preparing for this, we always said to our clients that half of our outcomes, half of our hires have been women or people of color. And Veronica pushed back through Deanna saying, could you break out the number of women that you hired? I went back last week and looked at all of the searches where I could remember what the outcome was. And there were 86 searches and 43 of the hires were women. So 50% of our hires have been women. There's more people of color. So that's just a little bit about our background. I continue to do strategy work. I do interim general manager positions. So we know a lot about public media. So next slide. So, and Kim covered a lot of this. I just want to underscore a couple of things about, so as Linda said, do your research. You can't know too much about the organization. If your position has anything to do with content, you should listen to the station, listen to and watch it. That we'll be looking for, are you actually interviewing with us, or is this some kind of generic interview? I wanted to kind of Kim talked about this some, and I'll just take a couple of minutes to the key thing about interviews are answering questions. The cardinal sin in answering questions is talking too much. It's a general guideline, but 2 minutes is around the right amount of time. Kim talked about the importance of story. Information is interesting, stories change us. She also talked about one of the things I say to boards all the time is there's two kinds of people in the world, those who have done things and those who have theories about doing them. And what you want to sort through as you're doing the interview is you need to know that. And a kind of an answer, Kim talked about this, kind of an answer that candidates sometimes give us, well, we're going to ask you what kind of a leader you are, what's your management style? And if you just answer in generalities, it's just not going to stick. It's not going to be enough. If I'm doing the interview, I may come back and ask you again. So have that information at your fingertips. This is the difference that I made in the place. I think it was Linda talked about anticipating the questions. What I say you can do to prepare for an interview is pick out 5 questions that you think are going to be asked. There's no way to be sure. And again, you've got 2 minutes to answer the questions, so build out your answer. When we do video interviews, I can guarantee you that we're going to ask you to start by saying why you're interested in the position, and we're going to finish by saying what would you like to leave us with. Kim mentioned that too. What's the takeaway you want the organization? So there's 2 questions there. You want to tell a story and you want to give some facts. And you study the job description, think of the things that they might ask you, and prepare those questions and practice them. It's, why do musicians practice? My first station was across the hall from the practice rooms, and those kids were in there 8 hours a day. And why do you practice? It's to build your muscle memory, so that when you get asked a question, it just kind of comes to you, and then you can focus on other parts of the interview. Kim talked about some of the keys for Zoom interviews. There's a lot of that out there. I saw a story in the New York Times last week about one of the things they talked about is leaning into the camera. Here's just a couple more. Everybody may know this, but you should have front lighting. If you've ever been around a TV studio, you'll know this. I've got a big bright desk lamp in front of me shining light in my face. Don't sit in front of the light. If you're backlit, your face is going to be dark. And we started using video technology 5 or 6 years ago, and one of the things you don't want to see as a search firm is those unfortunate things like that. I've seen people interview in T-shirts. It's just we forget ourselves. We've been doing this enough now, so we most of this should have been. We've gotten past this. One other thing I was talking to my son who does all our technology, and he said a tip that he has for people is when we interview, the most unsettling thing unsettling thing for us in an interview is seeing our picture the way it looks to other people. And I guess there's a setting on Zoom, I've never done this, where you can set it to mirror image. And so it'll look like you look in the mirror. That's just a way to have yourself be a little more comfortable. Next slide, please. That's just a few ideas about the interview process. What we expect is that, you know, we had this business after September 11th, which to me is a lot like the situation we have now, this sudden stop to everything. I talked to one of our public radio leaders today getting ready for this call, and it's like all of our, many of our revenue sources have just dried up. It's going to get really quiet out there, that there'll be few jobs and a lot of candidates. What we expect will happen, we've got some searches that are open now, you know, that we started when we were at more than full employment in February, and it was really tough to get candidates. We still haven't seen the flood, but I think that's going to happen. Kim was talking about some different outcomes. We have 3 searches that are close in different varying stages of completing, and they've gone in 3 different directions. Like what happens in COVID? We did the University of Indiana general manager search, and they decided to go ahead with Zoom, and they used Zoom. They had a big staff interview. They had a public kind of interview where there were like 50 people on the interview. They interviewed with the search committee, and the decision will be made by the provost. And I think we're still waiting on that. The question is, it's hard to wrap my mind around. I think we talked about this when we all got together to talk about this session, but it's hard to imagine hiring somebody when you can't look them in the eye, or they don't get to look at the community. But they've decided to go ahead, and we're just waiting for them to make the decision. We were at the finalist interview stage with the Las Vegas public radio search, and they just shut the whole thing down. The whole city really shut down. It was one of the really hard hit cities. And that was a couple of months ago. And they said, maybe we'll talk in August. And so that whole search is just sitting there. And then we're wrapping up the search for Pioneer Public Television, and they're figuring it out. We're going to do the Zoom interviews next week, and you can kind of travel a little bit. Their situation is they're way out it's a very rural area, and they believe that any candidate that they hire needs to understand that, including driving there from Minneapolis, which is a long trip. So that's just kind of, it is all over the map. We don't know where that's going to go. Now, with position, with not a lot of hiring likely to be going on, we're in the middle of a generational change in leadership. I'm close to retirement age myself. I'm right in the middle of the baby boom. Public media was particularly a baby boom thing. So there will continue to be changes. As Kim said, there's 2 things that can happen now. A board may say, listen, buddy, you're just not cutting it here. We're going to have to move on. This is an intensely challenging period. I actually thought we got a lot of searches between the September 11th recession and the 2008 recession when that happened, when the board said, we just got to move on. I thought that was going to happen a lot in 2008. It didn't really, but we just don't know. And it may be that managers can understand the job that's ahead of them. I had one manager say to me, that she wished she had retired a year ago, but now she's in the middle of it. And so the generational change in leadership, and then finally, think of your career development as a career-long activity, and that you're always working on it, and this may be a time to work on. If you want to be a great candidate, make yourself a great leader. And I'm just about done here, so let's switch to the last of my slides. In our process, what we do is we interview the search committee, we interview members of the board, we interview the staff, and then we have them vote on the key attributes in the next leader. And this is through 2015 because the results weren't changing that much. There's 52 different attributes. These top 5, or the top 5 here, are always going to be on the list. This is a pretty important list. You can it's hundreds, over 1,000 boards and staff members, and this is what we look for in our public media leaders. Some of it you may look at and go, well, duh, but this is data. It's more than just Tom making up the list. So you should reflect these things in your materials when you talk about. Think about it ahead of time. And you should also, when you look at your professional development, these are the things I'm going to need to have as I move forward as a leader. So I'll stop there. I'm looking forward to questions.
Okay, thank you, Tom and Kim. And I'd like to just jump back to something you said, Tom, and that is to make yourself a great candidate, be a great leader. What do you mean by that, and what sorts of professional development should individuals seek if they are looking to go to that C-suite level?
Yep, we could go back to my list for a second. Just back one slide. So this is these are the things. Leadership, and it may be, our list it's a list that I made up from when we started building this list. This is what search committees said they wanted. These are the things, that's how we made the list. There may be, so everybody wants you to be a leader. So there's all kinds of materials out there about leadership. It's like the distinction between providing strategic direction and managing the organization, which should also be on this list that's kind of divided by the list is you need to be a good manager. So you can learn, emotional intelligence is something that you can learn. You learn by reading. There's a lot of coursework out there. Communication is a technical skill. I've done a lot of reading in my life. I've looked for important books by people. That changes me. We all have our different modes of learning. It could be workshops, but this is the list of stuff you should check out. And you can do assessments, find out what you're good at, and build your strengths.
And Kim, when you think about the CEO of a station, there are so many facets to the job. It could include content, fundraising, engineering, finance, board management, community outreach, and on and on. So what advice do you have for the candidate who may have specific experience in one area, such as finance or development, but not in another? How do you build your confidence and build your ability to demonstrate that you could do all of these jobs?
Yeah. Thank you, Linda, for the question. It's a great question. I think often when we read a role spec, those role specifications list everything we'd like that candidate to be able to do. And we're essentially looking for a purple unicorn. So often there is no person that fits all of those criteria. My best advice is, as you are considering that opportunity, really better understand the objective of the station at that time, what the context of the role is, and what the board's trying to accomplish. Is this a station in transition? Is this a station that is struggling because they're coming out of a Me Too issue? Is this a station who's struggling to transition into a digital era? So understanding where the emphasis for the role might be. Is there a capital campaign about to be launched? If there is a particular initiative or emphasis for the role that really seems to come through in the role spec, and that's something that you happen to do well, that's something to lean into. I think also as boards consider candidates for roles, what we will often say is, if you're considering candidate A, but candidate A does not have, for example, a strong financial background, might you hire a strong CFO or a strong number two who brings a complementary skill set? That's often a way that boards solve those less experience in a particular dimension of the role where the candidate may need some additional support to come up to speed. But also be realistic. If you are really a fundraising person and you've had no management experience, you've never led a team larger than one or two, it would be tough potentially to step into a role where you're leading a team of 150. So being a little realistic about your experience and what you need to pick up along the way to be a candidate for those roles.
I'm wondering, from both of your perspectives, how you motivate certain candidates in the first place and what your experience has been. Tom, you're saying that there should be many candidates for a few positions, but there are times when people who really have the potential and the qualifications just don't think they're ready. And how do you, as someone representing the company, talk to them to say, hey, I think you are ready, and this is how you should go about your application?
You want me to go first?
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
So when we recruit, we're not trying to convince anybody of anything. First of all, our job is to put the opportunity in front of people. Also, I like, as I said in my bio, I'm a trained executive coach, so I do coaching work, and I'll engage in a conversation. I know what's out there in terms of what they need for this position, what's needed in public media leaders, and I'll talk it through with candidates. I think applying for and interviewing for jobs is a great professional development activity. Sometimes I'll say to people who say, I don't know if I should apply for the job. I say, well, first of all, I say, are you interested in the job? And then secondly, it's only a problem if you can't take no for an answer. It's interesting to learn what people are looking for. If you get as far, whatever level of interviewing you get, that can give you a sense of what you're looking for. So I don't try to convince anybody of anything.
Kim, do you take that same view, or how do you approach the reluctant candidate who may have great potential but is reluctant?
I totally agree with Tom, and our job in the recruiting profession isn't to convince someone to take a job, although we do try to persuade them at times. I think often that nudging comes internally, and I've often seen an internal candidate who may not feel that he or she is ready be encouraged by a board member or by a CEO who has said, I see potential in you. I think you can step into the role. I think you should apply. So often that peer level or kind of mentor sponsor type encouragement can be quite effective in encouraging someone to throw their hat in the ring if they're inclined. But I agree with Tom. If you're not willing to hear no, that you shouldn't apply. But I do think it's a great developmental opportunity, and often we do see internal candidates be the ones selected for the job because they're known to the organization and warmly supported.
Okay, let's say someone has made the decision now to throw her or his hat into the ring. You've talked about preparation, but Tom, do you have some items to add to that? Maybe 2 or 3 key things that people should do in preparing?
I think that we've covered it pretty extensively. There's lots of resources out there. So yeah, again, I think the keys are, there were some things that you said, Linda, I wanted to go back to. To anticipate what the questions are, to research the organization, practice your interview, and I think those are the key things.
I did say that, but Kim, do you agree with that? There are others who might say, be yourself, be spontaneous.
Well, I think I'm a big believer in being prepared. There's such a thing as over preparing. You should be yourself, but be the very best version of yourself. And I think that means be well researched. Look up the people that you're meeting with, look up their backgrounds. So if you have an opportunity to find a point of connection, that can be helpful to you. Have some good questions about the company or the opportunity prepared. And then really think about a couple of examples, ideally from your more recent experience. So storytelling about something you did 20 years ago is less relevant than something you did 2 or 3 years ago. And really give an example of your impact, especially if you're a candidate who's not an obvious candidate for the role. You might have to do a little bit more work to link the relevance of your opportunity and what you've done to the role you're applying for. And so really being thoughtful about giving examples of things you've done, things you've led, ways you've had impact that are directly relevant to the role you're applying for.
One of the questions we frequently hear is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What are some of the best answers you've heard, Tom?
Yeah, I hate that question. And it's sort of a, Kim in a very nice way talked about this, that we're not very, boards are not very expert in interviewing. And that's a very common question. It's a kind of a throw yourself under the bus question. So you ought to be clear about what your strengths are and be able to answer that in a very clear way. The answers that, and when that does get asked, the answer that kind of bugs me is somebody will say, well, people say I work too hard. That's my fault, right? So I don't have a very good answer to that question, but what I say is when the news is bad, you should not talk about personal stuff. You are not called on in this setting to say revealing personal negative stuff. For example, if you've lost your job, you can expect, if it's a search we're doing, we're going to ask you about that. And this isn't like press conference 101, is that if the news is bad, be factual and move on. So you should probably prepare for that question because you'll get asked it. But again, you don't, something that is, I remember I did an interview when I was looking for a job, and I said, I'm not a detail person, and I think there's a way to, I didn't get the job, so I don't know if that was why. I was telling the truth. I'm a big picture person. I'm a visionary. I'm going to have people around me. So prepare in advance, I guess, is the best that I could do. And don't say anything that, I'm not, any criminal activity in your past or something.
Kim, what about you? That especially.
I also hate that question, and I think you will prepare to get asked it. I agree with Tom. Be clear about what your strengths are, and they should tie ideally to the job you're applying for, and they should be true. On weaknesses, I always hear the "I work too hard" answer, which I also dislike. I think the best way to answer that question, in my opinion, is do not air dirty laundry. And be thoughtful about how you describe a weakness. The best way to answer it is to maybe share a piece of developmental feedback you've had about something you're working on. I've been told sometimes I'm making this up now, I can maybe move a little fast in my conversation, forget to bring people along. I can do a better job of making sure I'm really getting all of the people in line with me on a particular plan before I barrel ahead. It's just, I'm making this up, but being thoughtful about how you describe a developmental opportunity, but cast yourself as someone who is aware of it, is working actively on it, and it's something in line with your leadership capability. That would be my best advice.
Yeah, and if I may just, what we're talking about, I was talking about how to structure an answer. So you might talk about some developmental work you did, and then have a data point showing that you're successful at it.
Yes, again, bringing it back to something that is relevant to you. What about scenario type questions? That sometimes comes up, especially in later stage interviews with finalists. The kind of what if question, if the pandemic lasts for another year and a half, and we're locked down, that kind of question. How do you advise individuals on how to answer scenario questions?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So it's like what I was talking about, anticipating the questions that you might get asked. What's going on with this organization, and as much as you can, try to think that through. I think giving examples from your history of a similar situation is kind of good. But as much as you can, try to think ahead what you might get asked and be prepared. That's what you just asked is a great question. So we're in the middle of COVID. So what are we going to do? So I just try to anticipate, try to come up with 2 or 3 scenarios. You can make yourself crazy if you try to imagine everything, and focus on the experience that you've had dealing with a similar situation.
That's great. So you're saying focus on your experience, but then also as it applies to the organization.
Right. And this thing that you've just been asked.
And Kim, some of the best interviews I've seen have really turned into more like conversations, especially toward the end of the interview, when the prepared questions from the interviewers have moved on and there really is a conversation. How can you get to that point? And how can you really show your passion and your beliefs in the value system and the things you want to get across in a really good conversation?
Yeah. I think if you haven't researched the opportunity, it's really impossible to do that. But if you come up with a couple of thoughtful questions. So for example, I noticed that you're opening up a new community space, and I'm really excited about your vision for that. How are you thinking the next leader of the station will take advantage of this community gathering space? What are the board's ideas about that? Being able to turn it into an engaging discussion where that person's going to lean in. And I think people love to talk about themselves. I think that's what I find in my line of work. And that's true of interviewers and board members. So being able to turn the conversation to a topic that is of interest to the station, is on the strategic agenda. Often the board strategic plans are available publicly. Being able to turn the conversation to something that station or board is focused on strategically will lift your conversation away from answering questions about your resume in the past and moving to a what is the path forward and how might you as a candidate lean into a more active discussion about forward opportunities.
We're going to be turning in just a moment to questions from our audience, and we thank you for staying with us. And I'd like to have you each react, though, before we move to the audience questions, on this environment that we are facing right now, the COVID-19, what it means in terms of hiring, travel, all these kinds of issues that someone should be aware of. Tom, what are you finding and advising your clients?
Yeah, I addressed some of it already. It's going to be, it will, and Kim talked about it too. There'll be more heavily reliance on doing Zoom interviews. I don't know, again, we're in the middle of this search where they think they've got to see somebody face to face. Again, I suppose looking ahead as a candidate, you should be prepared, think about yourself, think about how safe you feel traveling, and do you have to step away from the position? Are there boundaries that you can have around it? It's an important thing to think through. What's your safety situation for my clients with this pioneer job? I hope that we can have the candidates meet in person, but it's kind of day to day. We don't know where this is going to head.
Kim?
I mean, we're in the middle of it now. And so I agree with Tom. We're all embarking upon uncharted territory here. In my observation, boards are quickly becoming accustomed to convening virtually. People are getting more comfortable over Zoom. We have closed some searches where our clients have not met candidates in person and vice versa. Not a lot, but it is happening. But I think in general, the environment has really slowed the hiring process down quite a lot, if not put it to a standstill in some places. And so expect slower processes, expect that on the candidate side, candidates will want more information. I think it's more difficult to pull people out of roles if they feel that they're well situated, because that feels risky to consider a move without being able to fully vet a new opportunity in person. So I think it's going to slow the whole system down.
So with that slowing down, it sounds to me this might be an opportunity to really work on professional development. And as you talked about, be a leader. If you're going to be a good candidate, be a leader. Think about those areas that you could build out your own portfolio and gain some experience and background. So thank you both, Tom and Kim. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm going to turn it over to Katie now, because I know we have some questions coming in from the audience. Katie?
Yeah, we have had quite a few great questions come in. So I'm just going to kind of start to work through these. Some of them are kind of compound questions or questions of the follow-up. The first question is, what's the best way to assemble a dossier of work as we prepare for an interview? What things should we highlight? And then some follow-up or related questions are there any particular ways that these attributes are best demonstrated? And are writing skills an absolute must?
Yes.
Yes to writing skills. Okay. What's the best way to kind of assemble that work and to display, what your skills are?
Yeah, it depends to some extent on the position. But Linda started out with this. Your resume is a really important document. And she said it exactly right too, that your resume looks like a fixed document, but but you tailor it to the position. There's going to be a letter, and it needs to be a really good letter. It's probably 2 pages or less. And then if the position requires writing, having a only provide stuff. I think only provide stuff if it's asked for. In the searches that we do, we don't typically ask for writing samples, but you should have them available. Samples of your work. If you're being hired as a communication director, chances are they're gonna want writing samples.
I agree. I think the resume is the most important document at the level that we hire. It's rare that we get asked for writing samples, although that has happened to me once or twice. Your resume should be ideally not longer than 2 pages, and you should spend more time on your more recent roles, less time on your roles from earlier in your career. So if your resume, if you're finding it too difficult to trim it, but your roles 20 plus years ago are taking up half of your resume, I strongly suggest that you trim that down.
Okay. The next question, Tom, I think you talked a little bit about kind of experiencing a generational shift, so we'll kind of go back to that for a moment. The questions are about how to position yourself if you're younger, and I'm a millennial, self-identifying millennial, so this is something I'm interested in as well. Because we're going through a lot of change right now as a system and an industry and kind of a world, truly, there seems to be a preference for very experienced C-class candidates. But because we're also in this generational shift, that seems like it might be a little restrictive. So I think we were just wondering, how you kind of position yourself if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of that C-suite experience already in these kind of tumultuous times. And then also, what is the best way to respond if you're in an interview and the comment comes up that you seem to be young for a leader or you seem to be young for this C-suite position?
Yeah, I guess being prepared for that is useful. That's another terrible question that should never be asked. So good interviewing is good interviewing. And one of the things I said, we were talking earlier about, pieces of advice. What I say to people is your job is to be as powerfully authentic, as powerfully yourself as possible. And if they hire you for who you are, that's the right decision. If they don't hire you for who you are, that's the right decision too. I think just don't be intimidated by the process, throw your shoulders back and be proud about what you have. If you're younger in appearance or earlier in your career, it may be more important for you to, there's a kind of resume that, sort of resume talk is there's skills resumes and there's experience resumes, and that you can focus on the different kinds of skills that you've had in the past. And when the organization is looking for dynamic new leadership, and you have the skill set that they're looking for and can demonstrate that energy, they'll hire you.
And I would add, public media is in a state of transition. People are consuming content completely differently than they did 5 years ago. And so there is certainly relevance for a younger generation of talent who is, the desired audience often, public media stations who want to attract younger and more diverse audiences. So if that's the objective of a public media station, they need to walk the walk. And so that's something to be said for candidates who represent the profiles of the audience members the station wants to attract.
Yeah, I'd underscore that too. I hear that a lot from boards is our boards know that we're in this transition from broadcast to digital and online. And then that's the kind of, that's a skill set that that they think about from a generational standpoint.
Okay, great. Someone else asked, I'm interested in hearing more about how we can prepare for the finance side of C-suite jobs. This is a skill set so few of us have experience with. So what's the best way to prepare, even if it's just enough to get by?
Why don't you start, Kim? I've been starting all these.
The finance side of C-suite jobs. Well, I think if you've never had any exposure to a balance sheet or a budget, it can be a bit of a shock to walk into that. Is there a way for you to participate in the budgeting process at your station? Do you have an opportunity, or can you ask for that from a mentor or a sponsor? Hey, I've never been part of this process before. I'd love to just ride along this year. Or can I, if it's not possible for you to be in the meeting, is it possible for me to sit down with you afterwards and better understand just how this process works? So come from the position of educating yourself first. If you have an interview in 2 days and you've never had any exposure to this, a crash course online is unlikely to be that helpful to you. So my best advice would be find a friend. If you have someone that you can, in a virtual world, have coffee with in the finance department, or just help educate you on the side, that might be the fastest path to getting yourself up to speed a bit. The other possibility is if there's an opportunity for you to own maybe not even the P&L, but own the budget for a particular initiative or a project, that gives you the experience to talk about having had to manage a project where there was a budget attached. You had to be aware of that budget and how you were spending it. So even if it's not a full budget or a part of a budget, asking for that opportunity so you have something to demonstrate would be something I'd be, even in this time, be looking for if you can possibly get.
Yeah, all I'd add to that is it made me think about, I started managing my first station when I was 22 and still going to school. And one of the best things I did is I took a year of accounting. So there's a professional development piece. You need to have it, and managing the budget for your department, you ought to have some of that experience. It's like fundraising. We're going to ask for a general manager, CEO position. We're going to ask you tell us your major donor fundraising success stories, and if we're doing our job, we'll ask you about finances too. And then it comes back to the Kim talking about we're looking for unicorns here. There's a lot of stuff we're looking for, and if you're strong in other areas. And can have sometimes it helps to talk about how you teach yourself stuff. Sometimes we'll ask people that, a plan about getting the skills.
Katie, can I just jump in? One other way to really get up to speed on finance is to join an organization and serve on the finance committee, because you'll end up working with the finances of that organization and maybe their investments. So it's a really great way to network, be part of something, and then learn finance as well, especially a nonprofit.
Yeah, Linda, could you give an example of like what kind of organization might be one you'd volunteer for?
Oh, it could be a group in your peer group. It could be programmers. It could be some sort of organization that is in your community that might be related in terms of a nonprofit. And then just get familiar with how they do their finance. You can volunteer to even just sort of be on that finance committee and see how they do their budget and review it, especially if they have an endowment and there might be investments involved. It's a great way to learn about something. Community Foundation would be a great organization.
Great. Okay, let's see. So what happens if you apply for a C-suite position and then realize that it's not the right fit for you? How do you step back gracefully?
Wow, that's an interesting question. It sounds like that's happened to someone. So my best advice would be if you've applied for the role and you realize before you've had an interview that it's not for you, you might need to find a way to say, you know what, I've given some to your hiring manager or to your boss, I've given some thought to this. I'm not sure this is the right time for me. I really love what I'm doing now, and I'd love to have another year in this role to just further demonstrate my success here before thinking about the next thing. So sort of it's a gentle version of the old breakup talk. It's not you, it's me. So that would be how I would advise you to walk back from it gracefully if you can.
Yeah, and I'd say I love the search. I love the search process. I think it's pretty great to be in a search where there's search professionals involved, and you can have that conversation typically with the search professional. You could have that conversation with Kim. It's when the further along we get in a search, the more it screws things up when somebody pulls out. But I also say that you can say no right up until and after you get the offer. It's very important to be paying attention as you go. You're interviewing them too. People say that as a truism, but that's the case. And so and I think it does come down to emotional intelligence and being gracious. And Kim saying the breakup talk is good. It's just being straightforward, not making them wrong, and it is something that happens in just about every search.
The one thing I'd add is, if you're applying for the job just to see if you could get it without actually intending to take it, please don't do that. It really does mess up search processes, and also it results in some burned bridges and people being unhappy about it. So, go in with your whole heart. If you, at some point along the way, realize the fit isn't right or the organization isn't right for you, full permission to disengage at any point in time gracefully. But going all the way to offer and never intending to take it and walking away at that point really does tend to upset people. So my advice would be try not to do that.
Yeah, that's what I say to people is it's only really a problem if you know you won't accept the job if it's offered. And if that's the case, then step away as soon as you know that.
Great. We have a few more questions, but there's one that's kind of a follow-up to the conversation we were just having about kind of like your finance know-how. In regards to CEO and GM positions, if you do well in a lot of different areas like content, communication, management, but have little experience with finance due to the structure of the station, is getting an MBA a good filler, or is hands-on experience the only thing that is really looked at in regards to finance?
I think any kind of professional development is good. When you there's a thing called behavior-based interviews where you ask a question about what the specific experience is that you've had. That's the main thing. So that's part of that was embedded in your question. I like JDs. I like Masters of Business. I like those interviews. One of the things that shows me is the person can really complete a task. So professional development I think is really important, and you do it for yourself. But also when you can add those letters, it's a pretty good thing.
I agree with you, Tom. I would say one thing slightly separately. If you are in line for a CEO or GM role and you're far enough along in your career, you'd be a candidate for that, but you don't have an MBA. In my view, I don't think that that's a necessary qualification for those roles. In fact, I just placed someone in a CEO role at a large station who is a wonderful candidate, does not have a financial background. And the board was very clear about that. And the chair of the board is a former hedge fund executive, extremely numerate, knows his finances backwards and forwards, and they were very comfortable that was a gap for her. And so they have a strong finance person in place with her, and the board is committed. That's a known gap, and they're very happy to work with her. And she's very happy to learn up as much as she can. So I wouldn't necessarily say you need to go get an MBA, but if you can find a way to educate yourself, whether that's going and taking a couple of classes on the side or getting some experience in that dimension, by all means, I'm a strong believer in professional development.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's not, business tends to not be that high on the list of boards, even though it's really important. There's a situational piece to it. If Kim was talking about, like, if there's been a Me Too thing happen, if the station's finances have fallen apart, then they may be looking for that, and chances are that you'd know. But yeah, you don't need an MBA. There's not that many in our manager corps.
Okay, let's see. Our next question is about the concept of figuring out the climate of a station, figuring out if it's a good fit. That's something you talked about at the top of the webinar. Do y'all have suggestions for how to kind of conduct research to understand the climate of the station, maybe beyond just kind of general quantitative data?
This is an extraordinarily well-connected ecosystem of people. And so I would say the chances that you know someone at that station, or you know someone that knows someone at that station, are pretty good. And so my best advice would be look into your network and the network of your network and see what you can learn just anecdotally first. And then I think Tom had a wonderful suggestion earlier in the conversation around just better understanding what that station is putting out. Because we can listen to stations all over the country now, you should get a really good feel for what that station is doing, what the programming is like. That'll give you a feel for the climate of the station. But then finally, doing as much desktop research as you possibly can in substitute for walking the halls, which I hope at some point you'll be able to do again. But being able to get good references from people that you know who are in that station would be all good data points.
Yeah, what I say is that public media is a small town, and sometimes when you walk into the bar, you have to turn your head. That's what Kim said, very much so. There's so much online and these organizations are kind of important in their communities. So Google a station, read the news stories, Look, and you know, we're in the communication business. Our websites can be really useful tools, but it's a small town. Chances are you'll know somebody, and you know, I wouldn't hesitate to try calling, to call somebody there, call the person who's the manager now, and say, I'm thinking about this job, and you know, they might not be helpful, but we do love to talk about ourselves and our stations, and so you know, try that too.
Okay. This is a short answer, probably. On average, how many years of managing or leadership experience do you need before you apply for a C-suite position?
It's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question. So I don't know exactly how to answer that. I would say, you know, you need to, I mean, stepping back, looking at the role description, better understanding what they are looking for in that particular role will give you first some insight. And you may have some sense if this role is stepping into leading a team of 20 people and you've never led a team before, that might be a tough leap for you. Maybe not, I don't know. But I think getting some sense of what the role specification is, how well you match up to that, where your gaps would likely be, and where you need help stepping into that. So I don't think there is any cookie cutter answer to that question, but really better understanding what the role is and where your opportunities might be would be my best answer. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, 5 years. No, what you said is right. It's another one of those conversations I don't like very much with boards, but that typically they want to say that they want to have those qualifications in there. So like 3 to 5 years leading a team, you want to show progressive experience leading successively larger groups. You want to show in your resume, you want to show that your responsibilities are getting successively larger. I think what Kim said is there's a lot of small stations out there, and that, you know, if a station with 5 employees, the manager they hire might be their first manager's job. So it depends is a pretty good answer.
Okay. I have another question about kind of the culture of a station. Is there a graceful way to inquire how diverse a station's employee base might be?
I think in this day and age, you can just ask.
Yeah.
And I mean that really sincerely. I think everyone is taking diversity and inclusion extremely seriously. And I think you could very politely say that you're very passionate about diversity and inclusion, and you understand that the station is as well. How have they done on that topic thus far? How are they focused on that? So asking questions, maybe not around if you don't want to offend, or if you know that it's not very good, you might ask them instead how they're thinking about bringing more diversity and inclusion and equity into the stations and culture and environment. And that might give you a sense of where they are today and what their hopes are.
It's a great question to ask, and they shouldn't be offended by it. Everybody should be able to speak about that. You know, another truism about interviewing is that you're interviewing them too, and that's a kind of a good question to ask. Again, you know, as we were the previous question, it's a small town, and people are going to know. There might be press coverage on it too. But I do like the idea of asking that question. How are you doing with diversity? Where are you headed with that? And be prepared to answer that question yourself. I like to answer that. It's a critical question.
Definitely. Okay, we've got just a few more minutes left and a couple more questions to get through. So do you have any advice for someone who applies for a job at their home station and then, oh wait, I'm misreading this, I'm sorry. Let me frame this again. If you're applying for a job and your home station discovers you're looking and then you don't get the job, what advice do you have for that person who's maybe looking at a C-suite position elsewhere and their current employer finds out and then don't get the job you were looking at?
I'm actually glad you asked this question because it comes up all the time, and every situation is different. And you're going to know about that. You'll know more about your situation at your home station than I do. You know, the manager I always tried to be is when somebody said, "Hey, I'm thinking about this job," go, "Yes." You know, like you want your staff to grow, and if they move on, that's just fine. It's like being to some extent, it's like being a parent. You want your kids to grow up, and I have always believed that encouraging that people want to come to a place where they can grow. but that's not true in every case. You know, where it comes up for us is it's the confidentiality conversation. And we can, and we, you know, if we know that could be an issue for you, we can do a lot to keep it that way. We always tell our search committees that. Again, it's a small town. And so, I mean, if it's a problem for you, you should think about that as you go through the process. And so, Kim, what do you say about that?
I agree with you, Tom. I think there's always a risk that your candidacy leaks out. And that's, even though we can ask people to sign NDAs and take confidentiality seriously, people talk sometimes and they forget themselves. And so my advice is have an answer prepared in case you are put on the spot and asked, so that you aren't caught off guard. Because if you are caught off guard, who knows what you'll blurt out. I think the way to gracefully answer that question as best you can is to say how happy you are at the current station. You always want to grow. You saw this role and you just couldn't resist throwing your hat in the ring just because you were excited about the opportunity, and express how grateful you are to be in your current role and how happy you are there. Whether that's true or not, that would be my advice, because I think you want to be seen as someone who is a learner, who wants to grow in their role, who wants the next opportunity. And if that's not available to you in your current organization, you want to continue to seek out ways to grow professionally, and that's the objective, as opposed to, you know, running away from something that's, you know, negative. So I would try to spin it as positively as you can. That is an awkward conversation.
It's not a trivial question, and you know, ideally, and knowing when is kind of important. You know, if it means when you're offered the job that the first person you tell is your boss, that's an okay time to do it.
All right. So, how would you describe the difference in how community licensees and institutional licensees approach C-suite searches?
I'll let you take that one, Tom.
Okay, great. Search is search. You know, there's a difference for us, but it's a size thing. That the larger the organization is, at some point there's going to be a HR person involved, and they're often asked to do almost everything but the CEO search. How they approach search. You know, this Indiana search that we're doing, they have a protocol for dean level searches. And so you might see that in a place like, you know, there, or Iowa. We did the UNC TV search, you know, having everybody be involved. It's basically the same. You know, a university, particularly a state university, will have rules that have come down from the legislature, but those tend to be good rules, like, you know, your EEO stuff. So how was that, Kim?
And I'm thinking about mine. I mean, I did BUR recently, and the university really wasn't involved. They had one person on the board who was on the search committee who was wonderful and a great addition to the search committee. But CEO search is CEO search. I think the process is largely run the same way. There may be more stakeholders involved in some of the institutional environments, just because of the nature of how those organizations are structured. But in my view, it doesn't change the process overly.
It's universities. This is the hiring and firing people is challenging in university settings because they tend to have really strict rules. And so the process may take longer. As Kim said, there may be more stakeholders involved, but they're pretty similar.
Hey, yeah, that is super interesting. There's a lot of complexity within our industry for sure, between different types of stations and licensees. We're almost at time, so I think I'm just going to wrap up because we're at a good spot now. First, I just want to thank you so much to our amazing panelists and to you, our audience, for joining us for this conversation. This has been a really great and informative time. Be sure to visit our website, publicmediawomeninleadership.org, to find out what's in store for our 2020 for our advanced webinar series, and to learn more about our Empowering Public Media initiative. And as always, we'll be posting the recording of this webinar to our website. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.